Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Treasurer. In the next 3 months, it's expected that around 150,000 households with fixed-rate loans are at risk of falling off a $95 billion refinancing cliff. This will see some homeowners with repayments increasing by 50% overnight. Why then did the Treasurer use 3-year-old data to claim that Australians are finding it easier to pay their mortgages?
The call to the Treasurer.
Well, Mr Speaker, we know that the Shadow Treasurer was expecting a rate rise today because he's come in unprepared and had to read out yesterday's question. And you could see him rifling through his folder looking in vain for something relevant to say, Mr Speaker. Now, when it comes to fixed-rate mortgages, this is a substantial part of the pressure that a lot of Australians are feeling as a consequence of interest rates which started rising on their watch. The first interest rate rise in this cycle, which has put a lot of pressure on people, happened in May of 2022,
Member for Deakin.
when they were in government. And interest rates have continued to rise in ways that have put extra pressure on people. And we understand that, and we have acknowledged that throughout. And when it comes to people coming off fixed-rate mortgages onto variable-rate mortgages, this is a substantial part of the pressure. And if you think about it in quarterly terms, the biggest amount of fixed-rate mortgages becoming variable was last quarter. We think on the latest numbers about 17% of fixed-rate mortgages last quarter, 19% last quarter and about 17% this quarter. So there is still a substantial amount of people, but it peaked last quarter and it is coming off. But for those people, obviously higher rates put extra pressure on their household budgets, and that's a big part of the story. More broadly, Mr Speaker, we all know that interest rates have been rising because we've got, like most advanced major economies around the world, we've got an inflation challenge in our economy. And if the Shadow Treasurer really understood and really cared about the inflation challenge in our economy, he'd acknowledge that the highest quarterly inflation in this cycle, actually for some decades, was the March quarter of 2022 when they were in office. And so what matters here—
Order. The Treasurer will pause and I'll hear from the member for Hume.
Mr Speaker, relevance. The question was very specific, asking why the Treasurer was using 3-year-old data to try to explain that Australians are finding it easier to pay their mortgages.
The Treasurer is being relevant to the topic of the question, and under the standing orders, as long as being relevant to the topic, he's within the standing orders. If he strays from the question, I'll listen carefully to make sure that he is being relevant. The Treasurer has the call.
Mr Speaker, every time he opens his mouth he reminds us why he hardly ever gets a question. And we get the scripted intervention and he looks down the camera and we get the angry interventions from the Leader of the Opposition. When the real issue here, Mr Speaker,
The Treasurer will pause. Members on my right, the Treasurer will just cool his jets. Order. Members on my right. The member for McNamara is warned. It's far too much noise. I want to hear from the member for Petrie on a point of order.
Mr Speaker, it's just on reflecting on the Leader of the Opposition again. Reflecting on members. I mean, if we got up here and said he's got big ears and
Resume your seat. Yeah, resume your seat. I appreciate the member for Petrie's intervention. As I was trying to listen to the Treasurer, he was talking about the member for Hume, not the Leader of the Opposition. But I'll just ask the Treasurer to remain relevant to the question, and he can return to the question now. He has the call.
I don't know where to begin with that point of order, Mr Speaker, so I'll leave it be. When the Shadow Treasurer came up with his prescripted point of order, I was explaining to him, because he clearly doesn't understand, that the inflation challenge in our economy has been present for some time. And that's why rolling out billions of dollars in cost of living help is the first priority, the number one priority of this government, because we've got an inflation challenge. It's the reason why we've got a bigger surplus, taking the pressure off inflation. It's why we're investing in the supply-side challenges in our economy. And we are cleaning up the mess that they left behind, Mr Speaker, after a wasted decade of missed opportunities.
Time has concluded.